3 a.m., August 14th, 2025. Moscow was quiet. The streets were empty, buses stood still, and most of the city's 12 million residents were asleep. Then the air raid sirens began. The sound was loud and constant, spreading from one district to another. At the same time, people began to hear the buzz of engines. The noise was sharp and continuous. From the south, east, and north, drones appeared in the sky. Within minutes, the capital was under attack. Ukraine had launched more than 90 unmanned aircraft in a coordinated operation. Some drones flew high above the city. Others came in low, close to rooftops. Several carried explosives, while others were used as decoys to distract Russian defenses. The scale of the assault was bigger than anything Moscow had faced before. The first explosions were reported minutes after the sirens. A warehouse on the city's edge was hit. Fires spread quickly through the industrial yard. In other districts, apartment windows shattered from the shock waves. Glass fell into the streets. Cars parked along the roads were set on fire. Families woke up suddenly and rushed into hallways for cover. For the first time in years, residents of the capital felt the war directly inside their neighborhoods. As the first wave struck, 7 central districts reported damage. In some areas, buildings lost windows, walls cracked, and fire spread from one vehicle to another in crowded parking areas. Eyewitnesses later said the detonations came one after another. Videos recorded on mobile phones showed fire crews arriving at smoke-filled streets, while civilians carried belongings and tried to escape. The attack was not limited to residential areas. Moscow's airports were also affected. Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo, and Vnukovo reported drones overhead and falling debris near runways. Within minutes, all 3 airports declared emergency closures. Screens inside the terminals showed red lines of cancellations. More than 130 flights were diverted, and over 60 flights were delayed while aircraft circled above other cities waiting for clearance. Thousands of passengers were stranded. Business travelers missed connections, and families waiting for arrivals were told to return home. The closure of the airports was one of the clearest signs that the attack had reached deep into Moscow's infrastructure. These hubs handle tens of thousands of passengers daily and are vital for the movement of people and cargo. Overnight, they became silent halls filled with confused and frustrated travelers. Airlines began counting losses as fuel was wasted on rerouted flights, and passengers demanded refunds. Cargo flights carrying goods were delayed, causing disruptions to supply chains. On the ground, the damage spread quickly. Apartment courtyards were filled with burning cars. In some towers, doors were knocked off their frames by nearby blasts. Families stood in stairwells surrounded by dust and smoke. Power lines were cut in some neighborhoods after drones struck electrical infrastructure. Hospitals switched to backup generators to keep life support systems running. In the northeast, a communications relay was destroyed, leaving several districts without mobile phone service. 4 a.m., Moscow looked and sounded like a city under siege. Streets that were usually filled with late-night activity were empty except for emergency vehicles. Police blocked roads so that fire trucks and ambulances could pass. Sirens and alarms echoed across the skyline. Residents feared the next impact could hit anywhere: a school, a metro station, or a shopping center. By mid-morning, the smoke could be seen across the city. Fires burned in industrial depots, residential courtyards, and near metro stations. Entire streets were covered in shattered glass and debris. Eyewitnesses described the situation as chaos. Panic calls overwhelmed local services, and social media filled with videos and pleas for information. For many citizens, it was the first time they had experienced the war not through television, but outside their own windows. 6 a.m. The main waves slowed down, but the damage was already clear. 7 districts were affected. 3 airports were shut. Power and communications were disrupted. Businesses and households faced losses. Russia's Ministry of Defense announced that most drones had been intercepted and that the situation was under control. But the images and reports from civilians showed something different. Fires were still burning, airports remained closed, and thousands of people were displaced from their homes for the night. For Russia, this was more than physical damage. The assault showed that Moscow was vulnerable. For Ukraine, it was more than a strike. It was a message. The war had reached the Russian capital directly. 7:30 a.m., August 14, 2025. The drone waves had ended, but the full scale of the operation was becoming clear. Analysts confirmed Ukraine had used a swarm tactic. Drones were launched in groups from several directions. Some flew low, close to the ground, while others stayed high. Several were decoys, designed to trigger expensive interceptors. Others carried explosives for real strikes. This method forced Russian radar operators to track every signal at once. It was not possible to separate real threats from false ones in time. Electronic warfare was also part of the operation. Ukrainian forces reportedly used jamming devices to confuse radars and disrupt communications. Strong signals were sent to create blind spots. At the same time, some drones adjusted their flight paths in real time to exploit gaps in Russia's defenses. This allowed a portion of the strike group to bypass even advanced systems, such as the S-400 and Pantsir S-1, which are often described as Russia's most reliable platforms. Video footage and eyewitness accounts confirm that several drones reached central areas despite these defenses. The cost balance was also in Ukraine's favor. Russia fired missiles worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each. Many of them destroyed decoy drones that cost far less. At the same time, real strike drones carrying explosives hit key targets inside the city. The attack highlighted how modern warfare can favor cheaper, mass-produced systems when they are used in large numbers with smart planning. 9 a.m. Moscow's authorities tried to control the narrative. State television repeated that the situation was under control and that no serious harm had been done. Officials claimed most of the drones were intercepted. But this message did not match what residents saw. Smoke and flames were visible over central districts. Fires were still being fought. Cars were destroyed, apartments were damaged, and thousands of families had spent the night in fear. Independent videos continued to appear online. Several accounts that posted them were deleted. Others reported being pressured to remove their content. Some clips, however, spread before they could be taken down, showing burning courtyards, collapsed facades, and debris in residential areas. The contrast between official reports and real images created mistrust. Many citizens began to doubt whether the government was telling them the truth. For President Putin, this was politically sensitive. He has long promised that Moscow would remain secure. The idea of the capital being untouchable was part of the state's image of strength. The fact that more than 90 drones reached Moscow, that airports were closed, and that 7 districts reported damage raised serious questions. If Russia's most advanced defenses could not stop this attack, what could they stop in the future? 11 a.m. The economic cost of the attack was already visible. Businesses across damaged neighborhoods closed. Owners reported revenue losses of up to 40% in some cases. Restaurants and shops were forced to shut because of broken windows, fires, or lack of electricity. Deliveries across the city were delayed, and some logistics companies suspended operations for the day. Airports faced millions of dollars in losses from diversions and repairs. Insurance companies prepared for claims from vehicle owners and property managers. The total damage was estimated between 1.8 and 3.2 million US dollars in the first reports. While this amount is small compared to Russia's overall economy, the symbolic impact was serious. Moscow presents itself as the secure heart of the nation. Even a few million in sudden losses caused by drones showed that the city was not immune to the war. The social cost was also high. Families kept children home from school. Some professionals refused to go to offices near high-profile targets. People avoided crowded public spaces such as shopping centers and metro stations. Fear of another attack changed daily behavior across the city. Panic was not limited to those who were directly hit. Even those who only heard explosions or saw smoke felt unsafe. 2 p.m. observers noted that Ukraine's strike had 2 main effects: military and symbolic. Militarily, it forced Russia to spend expensive interceptors and exposed weaknesses in its defense systems. Symbolically, it showed that Moscow was vulnerable. For many Russians, this was the first time they saw their capital as a possible target. The image of invulnerability was broken. The attack also tested Russia's international image. Officials told foreign media that the event was minor, but international news agencies carried videos and eyewitness accounts that proved otherwise. The shutdown of Moscow's airports, the fires in multiple districts, and the visible smoke clouds could not be denied. The world saw that Russia's capital was no longer beyond reach. 5 p.m. Political fallout spread abroad as well. In Washington, some lawmakers worried that strikes deep into Moscow could escalate the war further. In Europe, leaders were divided. Some supported Ukraine's right to defend itself and hit back. Others feared wider conflict if Russia retaliated. For Ukraine, the operation was also a signal to partners. It showed Kyiv was willing to act boldly, even under pressure from allies not to expand strikes. By evening, the fires were under control, and the airports began to reopen. But the message of the night could not be erased. The attack had shown that modern warfare is not just about missiles and tanks. Cheap drones, used in large numbers with planning, can bypass even advanced defenses. It also showed that Moscow, the center of Russian political and economic life, could be reached. The drone strike on Moscow was not the largest strike in numbers compared to frontline battles, but it was the most important symbolically. More than 90 drones, 7 districts hit, 3 airports closed, millions in losses, and visible panic among residents. The operation used swarm tactics, decoys, and jamming to overwhelm Russia's systems. It left behind not only broken glass and burned cars, but also deep questions about the country's security. For Russia, it was a test it did not fully pass. For Ukraine, it was a demonstration that no city is untouchable.